Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's Data Color webinar with Damian McGillicuddy. I'm Boris Bergman from Data Color, and I would like to welcome you for this webinar here tonight. Damian, one of the most decorated photographers, he will give us some inside view into his photographic life, and we are pleased to have him here. With him, it is Richard West from Data Color. So hello, Damian. Hello, Richard. Are you there?
Hey, Boris.
Good evening, Boris.
Okay, great. So allow me to give you a short overview. I will hand you in a few seconds over to Damian, and we will see a nice presentation from Damian. And the duration of the entire presentation will be, let's say, 50, 60 minutes, something about this, maybe a few minutes more or less, doesn't matter. And after that presentation, we will go into the chat, and you have the possibility to enter all the questions you have. And Damian, Richard, and I, we will truly answer them. Okay, so because you don't want to listen to me, I will hand you over now to Damian. So Damian, please share your screen with us. It's your turn, please.
Good evening, everybody.
Perfect.
Yes,
and
we can see it. It's all good.
Fantastic. My name's Damian McGillicuddy. I am a Principal Photographer for Olympus and European Visionary for Olympus. Very grand titles, but in essence, I'm very simply a photographer like everybody else. I happen to be quite passionate about my photography, and it's light that is the main raw material for creating all of our images. One of the reasons that data color spiders are so important to me, but we'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. Now, some of you may have seen some of my work and think that I'm all about adding light with strobes, and that really isn't necessarily true. Ambient light, supplemental light, be it strobes or hot light, it's all there for us to be created with. And the truth of the matter is, I have no real preference for the source of the light, as long as the light is right for the shot. Now, from my point of view, what I'm hoping to do this evening is share a little time with you and talk through how I've lit some of the pictures. I've selected these really at random. They're not favourite pictures. Some of them I really love, some of them are just the work that I do that you may have seen in adverts or you may have seen in publications. But I've chose them so we can have an incremental build in the lights, starting with no lights and ending with 6 lights. And I'll explain from my point of view why I did it, the way I did it, and where the lights are. Perhaps quite arrogantly, I like to think of myself as a picture maker as opposed to a picture taker. So what do I mean by that? Basically, even when I'm observing pictures and I'm trying to take pictures that exist in front of me rather than building something, for example, a street scene, from my picture maker point of view, I will try and get the right angle, the right height, the correct exposure for the dramatic concept that I'm trying to shoot. So even though sometimes I'm not adding supplemental light, I'm trying to work with the existing light. So let's have a look at our first picture. This was an image I shot at the back end of last year in Malta at a very good friend's house, and I had the concept of wanting to shoot on the roof. I've used obviously my favourite cameras. This was shot on Olympus EM5 Mark II with the 45mm f1.8 because I wanted to throw the background out of focus, because I want it to feel like an exotic skyline. I don't want you to be able to look that in the roof garden opposite, the tomatoes are ripe or they haven't brought the washing in. I want it to feel like we imagine it. Now, it's a very simple looking picture, but the truth of the matter is, even this lit by God's own natural sunlight has to be thought about. I had to think about the direction, I had to think about the time of day. And in essence, we got up at about 5:30 in the morning to prepare for this, because the sun was in the right place, rising at about 6 o'clock. We shot the picture and then we went back to bed. And then before getting up for breakfast. But this is what I'm talking about, the difference between being a picture maker and a picture taker. I'm not happy just to accept what's there. I want to make the best of what's there. So this picture, very, very simply, is just observed natural light. But I've chosen the time and I've chosen the direction of light and the location to suit that picture. From my point of view, when we're using natural light, the one thing you can't do is move the light source, where we can if we're using strobes or hot lights. So in this instance, we have to wait for the right time or manipulate the subject within that light. So following on from this picture is another natural light picture, shot apparently at what would look as if it's the same time. However, it's not. It's actually the next day, because the light is so fleeting as it rises in Malta that there's perhaps a window of opportunity of 10 or 15 minutes to shoot before you're making compromises. And the one thing I don't like to do, based on my picture maker philosophy as opposed to a picture taker, is I don't like to compromise with my photography. So again, this is the next day, it's a little bit later, so the sun's a little bit higher, and we're using again observed light. That's the direction the light's coming from. However, sometimes things aren't that easy and aren't that straightforward to achieve. And this is where the next slide will show you a few tweaks that we've employed to get the picture that I had in my head out and captured onto the SD card in my Olympus camera. The first tweak is, you'll notice I've circled the washing line. The model Pixie, we went to great pains to make sure she just put enough tension on the washing line to be able to partially block out the sun. So it was causing a little bit of flare for me, but not too much flare. And then, as you can see on my very rudimentary scribbled diagrams, prop placement too becomes very important, because those light coloured towels aren't just adding strength, solidity and compositional interest into the picture. Because of the light, I'm also using them a little like a reflector to bounce some light back into the back of the model to raise the density of the shadow. And this is where colour management becomes really, really important. Cameras today can capture 8, 10, 12, 14 stops of data. But the truth of the matter is, if we're printing them traditionally, we get 6 stops of data. So running a colour managed workflow and soft proofing your work so you know what you see is what you get in the final image is very important to me. Call it arrogance, but I do like the pictures that I've shot to look the way I intended them to, as I assume everybody does. So if we're taking so much care and so much time over using natural light and understanding its direction and its qualities, because light only has 4 qualities: brightness, colour, direction and contrast. And these are the tools that we can use to realise our creative vision. So let's add supplemental light, and we'll start with just one light. Now, incidentally, the light source that you choose is virtually irrelevant, with one caveat, and that caveat is very simple. It must do what you need it to do. I often say to the people that I train or the people that come onto my workshops, if you've got money to spend on your photography, you should spend it in this ratio. First and foremost, education, because there's no point in having any of the gear if we've got none of the idea. Secondly, it's split, and that's split between quality light modifiers and lenses. Lenses will be with you all the time throughout your career. Quality light modifiers, well, they're the tools that we shape the raw material with, and there is a big reason that, you know, you can buy soft boxes for £30 and soft boxes for £300. I won't go into that here, but that's just something to be aware of. Next becomes your camera body. Now you've got to remember, when I started 30 years ago, your camera was just a light type box, and it was the lens and everything else and the light that made the difference. And things have changed as we've sort of raced forward into the digital age, but I do believe that we don't get the most out of our cameras before we hanker to upgrade. Also, you have to be careful, and this is the light source thing. I always say to people, get a quality light source that will serve your turn long after the credit card bill's paid off. Now, whether that's strobes that you plug into electricity outlets, or battery powered strobes, or speed lights, or hot lights, it really doesn't matter as long as it suits you. Personally, I like mobility, so I'm very much into Elinchron's ELB 400s because they give me a lot of power and a lot of mobility because they're battery sourced packs. Having said that, most of the pictures that you'll see tonight could have easily been done with £50 worth of speed light from eBay. The key critical source isn't the source itself, but it's how we modify that source. It's what we do with it to realize our creative vision. So let's move on to my next picture. Quite dramatic, very specular. When I'm thinking about light, I always think about light a little bit like paint, gloss, or matte. And the bigger and softer the light source, the more matte the image becomes. The smaller, the more shiny, the more contrasty the light source, the glossier it becomes. My makeup artist, Zoe, who I work with quite a lot, we often have this discussion because it's very in vogue, no pun intended, to have wet, dewy skin, so the skin shines and sort of irradiates. And if that's what I'm looking for in the studio, obviously not in front of the client, I always ask Zoe if she could make the client look a little bit sweaty. So this was captured with a single light source, an Elinchron ELB 400, fitted with a maxi bright reflector. Now that's basically just a big, shiny, silver metal dish. And what that does is it projects the light out quite dramatically. It gives us a quick transition between shadow and highlight, and it makes the light shiny and specular. And it gives us very clearly defined edges, delineation lines between shadow and highlight. Now for me, because this picture is all about capturing motion, and we had the model Tinkerbella bent over, then flipping up so her hair cascaded backwards and the material looks like either butterfly wings or maybe even the spirit of wind on the front of a Rolls Royce. The flash is important because we want to be able to arrest the motion that natural light, without a lot of it, wouldn't enable us to do. And as you can see, that was obviously shot within a studio space. But I wanted to show you that just building light up bit by bit is a very simple, very easy technique. This sort of look could be achieved, or very similarly achieved, with just a bare-faced speed light, as I say, from eBay very cheaply. But I would urge you, if you are going to look at lights, to invest in something proper. And the light was on a stand about 7 or 8 foot above the subject, angled down, to create the direction in light that you can see within the picture. Now, if we move on to our next image, the correlation is quite true. There's not much difference whatsoever between this and the previous? And you might say, yes, there is. They look totally different. All the contrast has gone. It's much softer. It's much more gentle. The point is, though, it's still one light, but we've changed the modifier and we've added a little bit of pop and burn, but I'll explain that in a moment. Any Americans that may be watching will understand the term. We call it in the UK dragging the shutter, but I thought for the purposes of this webinar I'd try and be a bit cool and funky, and I'd use pop and burn. So how was that picture lit? One of the things that I like to do, and by the way, any grammatical errors, spelling errors on any of these slides are purely my own work, and I should be commended for them. One of the things that very few people know is I am dyslexic, so actually writing things down is a challenge, and I do have a lovely gentleman who's our Director of Communication that generally oversees any of the blather that I write, but James is actually on holiday at the moment, so we can't blame him for any incorrect spellings. When I'm shooting something out on location, as this obviously was, I try to use the natural direction of light, and often it's not strong enough. Now I shoot as much as I can at the base ISO of my camera. On the Olympus cameras, just like Nikon, it's ISO 200. Canons tend to be ISO 100. Now that doesn't mean the camera can't shoot at higher ISOs. What it means for me, I believe, is I'm getting the best quality file possible. And anybody that went to the photography show at the NEC in Birmingham this year will have seen one of my files printed up 10 foot by about 12 foot as part of the stand at the photography show for Olympus. So these little sensors are quite capable, but it's like anything, you need to know how to make them run, and I want to give our printing department the best chance of getting the best quality print from my image, so I always try and shoot at ISO 200. The bottom line is, often with such a slower sensitivity in the sort of locations I like to shoot in, you don't get as much light as you would like. Now there was natural light coming through that doorway, but there wasn't enough, and it wasn't dramatic enough to make the picture that I wanted. So simply we put another ELB 400 in that hallway and we lit the subject. This time though, rather than having that hard specular dish, what we did was we changed the modifier from the Maxi Bright to a 36-inch McGillicuddy modifier. That's basically just a modifier that I designed several years ago. Very proud that it's won several awards. But it's basically a Swiss Army knife of modifiers. It's one unit that gives me multiple looks by changing accessories. So what I did was change the face of it and put a strip light or a strip box attachment on the front, which gives me a 3-foot strip box. Now I'm having a little bit of a love affair with strip lights at the moment because I do like the soft light that they produce, but I love the fact that it doesn't flood everywhere and it's very controllable. So here we've got the supplemental light lighting Sally Sparrow, our wonderful model there, but we've added a little bit of pop and burn. Now what that means is very simple. The aperture of the camera is dictated and works harmoniously with the flash. So if I want to shoot at, let's say, f5.6, I meter the flash to 5.6. But I'm using the natural ambient light that exists in the location, a bit like a fill light in this case. And I will have measured this independently with my meter. And it might tell me that at 5.6, I need an 1/8, a 1/10, or a 15th of a second. Now, I'm quite happy to handhold my Olympuses at that sort of speed because of the 5-way inbuilt image stabilization. The other secret is I use a technique called second or rear curtain sync. And basically what happens is the ambient light is gathered before the flash goes off. So the flash goes off towards the end of the cycle and the shutter closing. And in that way, I'm guaranteed having more of a sharp image overlaid from the flash on the potentially hand shaky, blurry ambient light, but it's a very simple way and a very easy way of making light look natural. And as I say, the Yanks call it pop and burn, we call it dragging the shutter, and I'm sure at some point Boris will interject and tell us what the Germans call it, although I'm fairly certain that none of us would be interested. I hope you're having a lovely evening, Boris, after talking about football. I like to build I like to build my lighting up one block of light at a time, a little bit like building with Lego. I actually call it the Lego brick technique, in the vain hope that one day Lego will hear about it and challenge my usage, because frankly the sort of publicity that that would generate I couldn't afford. However, they've chosen not to do so to this stage. But anybody that's a parent or anybody that's seen Lego will appreciate that one little block added with many other little blocks can create things that are quite frankly staggering. My middle boy, Callum, he's 10 years old, not this Christmas just gone, I think it was the Christmas before, we got him the Death Star to be made out of Lego. And Boxing Day he said to me, come on Dad, let's build this. And I got the manual out, which I kid you not was super A3 size and about an inch thick, and the truth of the matter is Callum's Death Star still isn't built. Photography I can do, Death Star building probably not. I do have the idea of super gluing it as I go, because I would hate to think I'd pick it up and drop it. But we're not here to talk about Lego or Death Stars or Star Wars, so let's have a little look at the next slide. This is an actual commission. It's a UK band. They've just done the Glastonbury Festival, and they're called Tankers the Henge. If you like music, they are sort of a mashup between Madness and all sorts of other genres. One of my favourite song of theirs is called Smiling Makes the Day Go Quicker, which was actually the theme tune used by IKEA for their Russian advert. So I'd strongly suggest you go and sort of have a look at Tankers the Henge. Now, this was shot literally minutes before they were going on stage. I'd been there and I'd been commissioned to shoot them individually, and they said, can we have a band picture, basically because the drummer had just joined and one of them was leaving, and it was an important thing for them. So trying to be nice to the clients, we did do. So we were shooting fast and furious under less than ideal conditions for this picture. So let's have a look what we did. Basically, and it's getting a bit predictable now, isn't it? I'm using an Elinchrom ELB 400, which is off to camera left, and it's fitted with the 50 by 130 centimetre strip box. Now, I've done that in centimetres just for Boris. Obviously, I'd prefer to do it in inches, but I'm trying to be European at this point. And as you can see in the note, it says it's side mounted. Now, what does that actually mean? It means instead of the strip box running vertically floor to ceiling, so it's long, tall and skinny, I've swapped it through 90 degrees so it's running horizontally. That way I can guarantee distributing my strip of light across the wider body of the group of people. But there's still a little bit of a trick here, and you can see that even though I'm using a softbox because it's relatively small in comparison to the distance away from the subjects, that the shadow definition is still quite crisp and still quite deep. And that's one of the things you need to realize about lighting. Just because it's big and soft doesn't mean it's going to look big and soft. It's dependent on where it is. Now, there is a second ELB with a standard metal dish reflector on it, and it's bouncing off the ceiling just to let a little waterfall of light sort of fall down onto the hair and the shoulders and add separation and definition. And again, because I'm a bit of a one-trick pony, I'm dragging the shutter, and the blue light running down the chalkboard is actually architectural mood lighting from the venue. So if I'd have used a fast shutter speed, that wouldn't have recorded. And in my opinion, using a slower shutter speed to get that colour into the picture was worth using that technique, that dragging the shutter, that pop and burn. That I was amazed at. I've shot many bands in my time, but this is the first band I've seen recently that in their offstage mode were having green tea rather than sex, drugs and rock and roll. I was slightly disappointed, to be honest. So we made a feature of it. Now, when I'm teaching, you'll often hear me say I like to stack the odds in my favour, and I do, and I have done on this picture. If we look at the next slide, where I've highlighted the two band members to camera right, one's a guitarist, one's a saxophonist. What I've done to stack the odds in my favour is ask them to look at the lead singer, Jazz, with the teacup on his head, not because it makes an interesting picture, although hopefully it does, shot on the 7-14mm ultra wide pro zoom lens from Olympus. What I've done is I've cheated slightly, because I knew by the time the light had got from the camera left of the frame to those gentlemen, there would have been a harder shadow on the side of their faces than their fellow band members, because of the distance the light was travelling. Basically, because of the inverse square law, it would have been running out of energy. So by asking them to turn the masks of the face towards the centre of the group, I've made sure that I've lit the mask of the face most appropriately, and I've kept the contrast range within principal boundaries, which was important because this made quite a big magazine spread for us. Too light can and are a very powerful tool. Now really, in the previous picture, if you add ambient light, the natural light that exists, or the architectural mood lighting, we were using 3 lights. Now you can see on the next picture, which is a picture of the lead singer, and frankly it's probably taken years and years and years to look that cool and that effortlessly cool. You can see that we're actually shooting in the same location, and these were shot before we shot the group picture. But what I've done is I've sped the shutter speed up a little bit, not to take into consideration as much ambient light as we did in the previous picture to get that blue running down the board, and it's darkened the background off a little bit more, so it feels as though it's got shape, form, tone and texture, but it's not competing with the main subject. Now we literally had 5 minutes to shoot each band member while they were doing sound checks, so we needed to make it simple and easy. My assistant and I used 2 lights on this. The key light, once more, is an Elinchrom ELB 400. You'll get me fed up of saying that, but it's in a very simple 105cm silver reflective umbrella. Used correctly, this gives a light not dissimilar to a beauty dish, but they're easier to transport and they're cheaper. So you know, if you're starting out in your lighting journey, don't think for 1 minute that you have to flex your flexible friend and go into debt. Simple umbrellas and a speed light, a third-party speed light, are more than capable of doing these types of job. And we actually do a umbrella workshop in my school, and we do Speedlight 101. And we welcome everybody from people that have only just picked up a camera to full-time pros that are earning a living. There's always something that can be learned. I learn something new every time I pick a camera up, to be honest. But the umbrella was good for this situation because it's controllable, it's fast and easy to set up, and it's an effective, contrasty, specular light that looks good, gritty on a guy. The second light is coming from behind, and it's an accent light. It's a second ELB, and I've kept the standard reflector on. It's just a very small metal dish with a perspex cover to soften the light. But most importantly in this, I've flagged the light, and that's just a technical term that means I've put something in the way. So where the light was, it was actually in an opening that could have been a doorway, but it wasn't. It was just an opening from this room into the next room, and we positioned the light very, very carefully so we would get this effect. I don't know, let me just see, can you see my mouse point? No, you can't on this, unfortunately. But the light, the little blade of light that runs down the back of his hair, down his scarf, his shoulder, and down the arm of his suit to camera right, separating him out of the background. That's what that accent light's doing. But I didn't want it to be harsh, and I didn't want to see it in the frame. So the thing that took the time with this picture was having James position the light until we didn't get lens flare, but we got that kiss of light to add separation. That's one of the big advantages with digital cameras these days, because you can fire off a shot, check it, and adjust. And then that way, I'm not leaving any time between me and my sitter for my sitter to get bored. For me, it's that Lego brick building block system that is the key to success. What looks really complex, if considered, can be created very, very easily. It's the structure of looking at the ambient light, deciding if you're going to use it or not, then looking at the quality of light that you're putting in as the key light. The key light is thus called because it's the key to the picture. It's the main light. It's the light that's giving shape, form, and texture to the subject. And then after that, we put in all the accent lights. Now, this is the approach, as it says on the slide, that we teach on our lighting and photography workshops. I like to call it edutainment. You'll see why in a little bit. So let's have a look at a typical example from a workshop. The reason I like to call it edutainment is very, very simple. I believe if we have fun doing something and we have a little bit of a laugh, the knowledge sneaks in unimpeded round the side and we don't have a block on learning. I think sometimes, depending on what our school days were like, we're a little bit resistant to wanting to pick up new information. And everything we do on our workshops and our education is to help you become the photographer you want to be. I don't want you to be a second-rate Damian McGillicuddy. I want you to be a first-rate you. And it's all about you and helping you enjoy your hobby, getting better within your hobby, or as a professional, earning more money easily. That's what our goal is at Damian McGillicuddy Photographic Training. So let's have a look at the picture. This is actually one of my favourite pictures shot last year at an Olympus big shoot experience, and we hired a lovely location from a gentleman called Joel Hicks, and because it was 100 years from Alice in Wonderland being written, we decided we'd have an Alice theme. And this is one of my favourite pictures from the theme. Leslie, who's really the boss at work, builds all our props. The lovely cakes that you can see are actually styrofoam, and sources all of the things for us, the cups, the chair, the whole 9 yards. It's all a team effort when you're working on something that can be as complex as this. So let me talk through the light for you. First and foremost, we add in the key light, and again, it's a 36-inch multi-modifier, but it's feathered, which is just a very technically posh term in photography for saying turned away and using the edge of the light. So the light falls off and it just lights the subject. You can see that her face is brighter than her feet. That's what feathering the light does. It lets the light fall off. Now, what we've done, because this is now, the multi-modifier is running a little bit like a softbox, an octabox. I wanted the light to be a tiny bit more contrasty, as you can see from the transition line between the shadow and highlight from the shadow under her nose. It's very crisp, it's very abrupt. It's a specular contrasty light source. So to achieve that, we took the outer diffuser away from the multi-modifier and we just left the inner baffling. So that increases the contrast. In other words, it makes it less soft, and that's the effect we were after for here. The next light is a warm gelled accent light. It's a burr bulb and it's acting as my setting sun. It's way, way, way back in the back of the picture, hidden behind the foliage to camera right, about 9 foot high on a big Manfrotto stand. And that's pretending to be my setting sun. And it's adding context and texture and warmth within the picture. We're actually under an overgrown arbour of trees that was creating its own shade with the odd little dapple of light through it. And we shot this between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because unfortunately sometimes we can't have everything the way we want it to be, and we have to work with the light and add the light to get the effect that we want based on time constraints. The background, I think, is beautiful in this picture, not the woodland part of it, because that is beautiful as nature is, but the dangling, streaming pieces of voile that Leslie's designed to give us give a stop in the picture where our eye arrests without wandering around too much, and then comes back to the focal point, which obviously at the end of the day is the subject. So let's see where we added the next light. And the next light is a second accent light, or as I like to call it to sound cool and trendy, an FX light, because that's what they call it in Hollywood. And this is literally in a gap in the trees to the side of the table. It's actually also the position that we were adding smoke in with our smoke machine. Now in the end that didn't work, so my assistant on this shoot, Guanyi, was actually hid under the table, and he would lift up the cloth and he'd let the smoke off, and then he'd close the cloth again, and we'd keep him there until it was perfect. I'm sure that's not probably the nicest job to have, or even the politically correct way to do it, but when we're out on location trying to shoot, what we want to do is get the result, and that means we just have to get on with the job and do what we need to do as quickly as possible. So this second light, which will have had a smaller, tighter strip box on, is flagged to illuminate the voile and the smoke. And again, as we've said before with the wall, flagged in very simple terms just means there's something in front of the light source. In this case, it was just a very, very dark towel, a dark grey near black towel that just helped us modify where the light went and where the light didn't go. Now again, as I've mentioned, we were under a little arbour of trees, so there wasn't that much natural light even in the dapples that came through, and there were areas within the picture that weren't being illuminated properly, and this is where things like the data colour spider become really, really important, because calibrating your screen gives you a state of more WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get, and because these things of mine are going to end up being in print somewhere, I need to make sure that I've got all the detail in all the areas that I want to. One of the things I often teach is if you shoot for the shadows and process for the highlights, just like we used to do on slide film, you won't go far wrong with a digital capture. So just to my side from my shooting position, I had another light without any modifier on, so it was a bare bulb. The light sort of goes omnidirectional in 180 degrees all over the place, and it was just a tiny popper light to raise the density of the shadow and make sure we've got detail in the areas that we want detail in. And again, dragging the shutter just allows us to have some of those dapples from the sunlight in the picture, as you can see round the hat, the Mad Hatter's hat on the floor. And I genuinely believe that light is the key to telling the story that we have in our head. We need to manipulate that raw material to create the vision that we've got, and it's something that we need to get to understand absolutely intimately. It was probably 15 years into my career before I had penny drop moments and light bulb moments, and as I say, you know, I'm very keen to point out that I learn something new every time I take a picture, and as the slide says, it's very important for me to have the base of my picture right. You know, the spider checker is something that we often use to have a base point to go back to, and my screen calibrators, well, frankly, I couldn't work with them. We do a lot of our printing in-house for finished pieces, and again, I know Leslie is forever making profiles for the paper that she uses. And one of the things that you need to be aware of, actually, if you are using profiling tools, and if you're not, you should be, because it's massively important, is it's not a case of you can do it once and forget about it. These things need doing repeatedly. You know, I do my screen every 2 weeks. It reminds me, your screen needs calibrating, come and do it, because it makes a big difference. I definitely want my images to be viewed by the people that are seeing them the way I want them to be seen. I want them to represent me. I want them to be the right thing for me, as I'm sure all artists do. But again, you know, we're here to talk about light, so let's have a look at another picture. One of the things we do quite a lot in my studio is beauty photography. We've done shoots in Sweden for L'Oreal. Yesterday we did a shoot for a, well, we're under NDA still, so I'll have to be careful here, for a music production company for a artist's advertising. And basically, in essence, we shot a beauty headshot, which is what we've got here. Light is quite a beguiling mistress, and what looks often very simple sometimes is more complex than we at first imagine. This was shot with the 75mm f1.8 lens that Olympus makes. That's 150mm in 35mm terms. It is an absolutely beautiful and stunning portrait lens. I love working with that. But again, as I was saying, you know, simplicity doesn't necessarily mean it's simply put together. This was a test we did. This is actually Zoe, my makeup artist, who should be commended for being able to get the craziness out of my head onto her face for this picture. So let's start with the first 2 lights that we've added. And we've got 2 Electron 50x130 strip boxes. They're the big ones that you make, which are about 6 foot behind Zoe and about 45 degrees away from her. And the lights are feathered away from us. They're deliberately turned away. So we're just using the edge of the light, and there's a lot of spill going into black battles by them. But that light is just giving us that rounded, kissed glow of light on the hair, on the shoulders, and most importantly running from her ears to her cheekbones. I always try to remember that when I'm taking a picture, what I'm trying to do is tell a 3-dimensional lie in a 2-dimensional medium. And I can do that by either adding shadow or specular highlight. So they're the tools that I tend to use. Key light. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. There is an issue with the sound at your end. I don't know, maybe from the bandwidth at the provider for a second. It started a few seconds ago. Please stop now. Once the screen sharing, press the stop button, then press once the microphone button, turn off, and turn the microphone on again.
Okay, no problem. Bear with me. I'll just have to start a slideshow.
That's a live situation, no problem. You can leave it as it is. Just press the stop button on the GoToWebinar main panel. That will, just
stop showing the screen.
Yeah, stop showing screen. That's it. Okay.
Right,
now press once the microphone symbol, the green one. It will off, and after 1-2 seconds, to press it again, you will come back. No problem.
I'm back. Hello, everybody. Can you still see my screen?
No, not yet, but share your screen with us. It's a little bit better with the audio. Not perfect, but okay. Just
I'm sure there are some people listening that would have said it was much better without being able to hear me. Right.
Press the button to the screen sharing. It's the play button. We see your screen. Perfect. Great.
And we're back again. Brilliant. Do apologise for that.
Sound is good.
Oh, good. I apologize. Let's blame Richard Branson because I should be running 200 megabyte Virgin broadband here. So, Richard, if you're one of the people listening, let's get it sorted, my friend. I'll have a bit of discount. The key light, again, there's a theme running here, isn't there? The key light is another large 50 by 130 strip box. I'm actually running D lights in the studio because this was shot in the studio. And it's positioned in that horizontal manner again. You can see that with the top catch light in her eyes. So that's allowing the light to wrap and envelop round her and be a little bit smoother. And it's boomed out above her and in front of the mask of her face. That's where it has to be if you're doing traditional beauty lighting. Now, interestingly enough, you can see that she's on a grey background here. Now, in my studio, that's actually a white wall. But the reason it's gone dark grey is because A, it's not lit, and the distance that she is away from the wall means the inverse square law is in action, and the light fall off is such that no light reaches there and it's not lit. So, do we add another light to the picture? Well, the answer is yes, as you can quite clearly see in a catch light in her eye. And we've got a smaller 35 by 90 centimetre strip box underneath, just controlling the level of shadows. It's running at roughly a 2:1 ratio. And what that's doing is making sure that we've got a smooth transition between shadow and highlight, and shadows that aren't too deep, black, dense, or crisp. So what looked very simple and very straightforward can be a complex number of Lego bricks that we use to build it. The idea, I believe, of a picture is not to have an obvious way that it was done. The picture has to look right, and we shouldn't really be able to tell how many lights it took to achieve that picture. And as I say, the structure of the Lego brick system works really well for me. I'm a simple chap at the end of the day. Now, those that might have made it to the photography show in Birmingham this year may have been lucky enough to get one of these images. Olympus had these produced as a limited edition of 50, and they literally gave them away. And I always love that, because when people either buy or win one of our limited editions, more often than not, they get it framed and they take a picture of it and they send it back to us just so we can see where our baby is living. Now, as we talk through this, we'll see that things can be considered and not complex. So they don't have to be as difficult as at first you think they are. I'm sure when you look at this picture, you'll realize that we've dragged the shutter again. It's a familiar theme here. You can tell that because we can actually see the incandescent light bulb and we can see it refracting out. We can tell that because the light behind the subject coming through the window is very bright, and that was the direction of the sunlight. And we've tried to make this picture look as though the light is coming from the window to camera left. But unfortunately, it wasn't strong or bright enough to give me the look that I wanted. So very, very simply, what we've done is we've taken another ELB 400, because this property that we're shooting in, it did have power sockets, but it was so old and so abandoned, I really didn't want to plug anything into it. So it was important that we had battery packs. And I kept the standard metal dish head on the ELB 400, and I literally bounced it into the corner of the room where the room joins the ceiling, and it gave us a beautiful reflected light with a quick fall off. You can see that in the shape of the musculature in her stomach and around her chest, and the fall off in the shadow to the side of her face, but it's still giving us nice smooth light. And what I'm trying to do is tell a lie. I'm trying to pretend that she's lit by that window opening, but unfortunately God wasn't helping me that day because the light was in the wrong place, so I had to help by augmenting it with a strobe, and that should show you that every picture is approached in a different manner, because we just don't know, especially when we're out on location, what the light's going to be like, or if we're in the studio, what light is going to suit the subject best. One of the things I will try and advise you to do is not fall into a routine of shooting the same thing in the same way, or everything in the same way, which is even worse. You have to give the best light for the subject at that time. That's what I believe. Now this next bit might sound slightly arrogant, but I like to approach my picture making as if it's a still from a movie. I want to communicate a feeling, a story, a mood. I want the viewer of my work to, if not understand directly what I was pointing at in the picture, to get the gist of the feeling. And I do know that that sounds a little bit arrogant, and I apologize for that, but it is how I work, and I build the image layer by layer. So hopefully I've gone at a pace that you've enjoyed, and hopefully I've given enough information to at least whet your appetite. I'd love to see some of you come in on some of our workshops, or go into our website and downloading the free educational material. We try and put how it was done and blog posts up on the website regularly, and we try and communicate when our workshops are via Facebook, via Twitter, via the website, and it would be lovely to see you. So let's have a challenge. Let's finish the talk of lighting with today's most complex lighting setup, a 6 light trick. And to ring the changes, it's a still life. This is one of my favourite pictures because technically it's quite a challenge to produce. The bed of slate that the objects are sat on has been washed down with baby oil to give it that shimmer and that texture and that shine. The background behind them is sheet steel that we've had in the studio, and we've washed with salt water until it corrodes to the point that we like it visually. We then wash the salt water off and varnish it so it doesn't change anymore. So let's talk about light and where we've positioned them. The first 2 lights are the big Rotolux strip boxes, and they're probably just 18 inches, 2 foot out of camera frame, and they're producing those lovely long sleek specular highlights that show the roundness of the opalescent glass, giving it its shape and giving it its form. Now I am aware that I've not spoken about exposure values or light measurements or power, because unless you're in the situation, the actual power is irrelevant because it will change every time we take the picture. I try very hard not to be formulaic, and if I am talking about power, rather than talking about f-stops, I prefer to talk about exposure values. So in this case, if we accept that they're the key lights, they may be EV plus 2 to the fill light. So in other words, 2 stops brighter measured than the fill light may be, or 3 stops maybe in this case. And in that way, you're not getting confused when we teach about specific f-stops. Oh, I must shoot this beauty picture at f5.6 for example. Now I'm not entirely sure this will translate. Hopefully it will do. But in the northwest of England where I live, we have a saying. Now the southern half of England have a similar saying. They say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and unfortunately they think it's right, but we know here in God's country that that's wrong. The real saying is beauty is in the eye of the checkbook holder. Now from my point of view, what that actually means, and this is why I don't like to talk about specific f-stops, because if I'm shooting a beauty campaign for L'Oreal, I might shoot the mask of this face at f4 or even f2.8. So as we run towards the ears of the subject, they fall out of focus, because to a makeup company, the important bit is the mask of the face. Now, if I was shooting for a jewellery manufacturer, let's say Schwarzkopf, I never pronounce that right, the people that make the beautiful crystal jewellery, and the whole focus of the picture, the point of the picture with the beautiful earrings, to shoot at 2.8 f4 would be ridiculous because they'd be out of focus. So I'd be shooting at with a deeper depth of field, perhaps maybe f8, to make sure that the bit the client wants to see is seen. And that's why beauty is in the eye of the checkbook holder, and that's why I tend to try not to discuss specific f-stops, because I don't want you ever to go away and think, I'll try that, I'll shoot it at 5.6 because that's what he said, because it mightn't suit the style of picture that you're taking. So let's add our next light. So this is light number 3 because we've got 2 strip boxes in already, and our next light very simply is a burr bulb bounced into an 8 foot by 4 foot V flat. In other words, it's 2 pieces of 8 foot by 4 foot foam board taped together and opened up like a book, and the light is bounced into it and out again. So we end up with 8 foot talls worth of light with perhaps 4 or 6 foot worth of breadth, depending on how wide you open that book up. And because it's indirect reflected light, it tends to be very smooth and very even. In the bad old days of film, it's what we used to call a splash fill, because if we were shooting family portraits and we had that 2 stops less than the key light, or EV minus 2 to the key, as we've described before, what happens then is you'd still get density on the negative, and it'd still, with a struggle, be printable, but it would work for us. So that's our third light. Let's add number 4. Number 4 is a 19 centimeter reflector dish with a grid on it to constrict the spread of the light, and it's sat just below or behind the objects, but below the table that the objects are sat on, and it's aimed just to raise it's aimed at the background. It's a separation light. It just brings the density of the background up slightly so we can see that rusted spotty texture rather than it just falling off to pure black. And again, this is something that Richard will talk about, how important it is to have a colour managed workflow so you can see easily, quickly and effectively what your pictures are going to look like. Truth of the matter is, we've all sent files off to a lab and got something back that we didn't expect to get back, and invariably that's down to the fact that we're not running a colour managed workflow. So let's add light number 5, and light number 5 is another tightly gridded mini reflector dish, this time with a CTO gel, a colour temperature orange gel, and as you can see in the picture, it's washing a warm light into the roundness of the opalescent ceramic ware. Now what we've done here as well, so we're not getting terrible specular highlights and spots, because we only want the highlights to be from the strip box, is we've done a thing called double diffusion, where we've projected the light through another diffusion screen to make it softer again. So that's light number 5, if I've not got myself carried away. And then, so where's light number 6? And again, this is a little bit of a sneaky light number 6. Light number 6 is a snooted light, so it's got a conical in front of the light to project a very, very narrow beam of light. And we've further restricted it, made it smaller, in other words, by covering the snoot with a thing called cinefoil. Now cinefoil is basically no different to kitchen foil that you might use to wrap a turkey if you're roasting it, other than the fact it's a little bit thicker, a little bit more robust, and it's matte black. And we use this all the time to create flags or light shapers or something to control the light further that maybe what's available in production can't do. So imagine the snoot, imagine the cinefoil over the front of it, and we've poked a tiny hole in it to get almost a pen light's worth of light, because what we wanted to do was to aim that light at the flowers to make sure that they're very visible within the composition, they leap out. And again, we've put an orange gel probably a two-stop CTO to make it warm and vibrant and colourful. So again, I'm stacking the odds in my favour all the time. So that's 10 images that we've talked to. I'd love to know if you've enjoyed it. If you have, I'm happy to come back and do other webinars and talk about lighting or camera craft or whatever it is that you'd like to learn from us. We're very free in giving our knowledge away. I believe by helping somebody else, it helps increase my knowledge within photography. So finally, before we set Richard to speaking about colour management, I would like to thank you for sharing my first experience of a webinar. Those that do know me will know that I'm no stranger to talking in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. That's quite easy compared to this, because you can see the audience, you can hear the audience, you can get feedback. From my point of view, I could have spent the last 30 minutes chatting to myself, and you're all enjoying a cool drink in your local hostelry. Hopefully not, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. So I'll ask you, if you have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed speaking with you, please visit our social media. Now, as I said previously, we often give away free information, and there's a couple of downloadable PDF books you can have with our compliments on our website, and you can get us at www.damianmcgillicuddy.com, or you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter. On Facebook, it's Damian McGillicuddy Photography Training. Please, if you've enjoyed it, go and like the page, leave a comment, give us a rating. It would be very, very welcome, specifically if you've enjoyed it. If you haven't enjoyed it, then just rate Richard. And you can find us on Twitter at McGillicuddy1. So from my point of view, I'll just hand over to Richard now. So I will just say thank you and good night, and I'll sit in the background and listen to Richard's wise words on colour management, which I suggest you guys do as well, simply because without this, you are missing a huge trick. So good night all, and thank you.
Cheers, Damien. Thanks, mate. Don't go anywhere just yet, because we no doubt will have some questions at the end for you. So sit around, and I'm going to be very brief tonight, because obviously we're already a bit over time. I'm just going to quickly run through, some of the key things that Damien was talking about during the session there. So, he mentioned soft proofing and profiling, basically, of printers. I mean, this is sort of our recommended workflow. Now, I'm not going to get a chance to go into this in any detail tonight, but basically come back, because we do regular webinars at Datacolor. So go and have a look at spider.datacolor.com, and you can see our list of webinars, both upcoming ones and pre-recorded ones. So this will be posted up there as well, so you'll be able to see this if you haven't seen it all tonight. Key thing is adding this soft proofing phase in, where you are trying to emulate the effect that print or paper or any type of output is going to have on your images. And you can do that soft proofing in things like Lightroom and Photoshop. Key thing, as Damien mentioned, you need to have generated a profile. So you can do that with the Spider Print, which is a print calibration device. But the most important part with all of calibration is what you're looking at on screen. You don't want to be misguided by your screens causing you any issue because there's a tint to the screen, because the screen fundamentally isn't calibrated to an international standard. So that's what the Spider does for you. It allows you to basically calibrate any type of screen pretty much that you can plug into a computer. So laptops, connected screens, projectors, depending on what sort of Spider you get, there are different versions. But nowadays 4K, 5K screens. So very simple process. You just plug in your Spider into your computer that's going to be running you're going to be calibrating the screen on. It can be Mac or PC. You run the software. There's a little example of the software there, and basically just pop that Spider onto the screen. The software then runs, as soon as you click go, runs a whole bunch of color swatches, now more than you're going to be seeing in this little sort of slide version of that calibration process. But what it's doing is it's looking at the colors. It knows what those colors should be, because the Spider has a sensor in there, basically. So it's reading the colors from the screen. And then basically it's essentially saying, oh, okay, actually this screen, compared to an international standard that is the same standard used by pretty much every screen manufacturer, camera manufacturer, operating system, and software manufacturer, certainly in the photographic or graphics industries, the ICC standard, this is calibrating to that standard basically. So it just corrects your screen and builds up this profile of your screen. So as soon as you hit save, your screen is then calibrated into that international standard. So that's what the Spider does. New version 5 came out middle of last year, so nice new version, been made more robust, had a lens cap added in there to protect the optics of the device. The optics have been encapsulated in an encapsulated environment so that they're more protected. And it comes in 3 flavors basically. So you can nowadays start with the Express, which is somewhere around the sort of £90 area in the UK. You possibly can get it for less than that. Have a look at various different sites to check your pricing. You can go up to the Pro. The Pro has some bells and whistles turned on, most importantly an ambient light sensor. So that's something that's sensing the lighting conditions you're in. Really useful if you're on the move, if you're working on laptop computers, because absolutely it's worthwhile you recalibrating every time you go somewhere new, because the lighting conditions you're in will affect the way you're seeing things. Now, the Pro, as I say, it's physically the same hardware as the Express. It's just a software upgrade to get to that, a payable software upgrade. So better to buy the model that's right for you now. But same thing applies. You can go all the way up to the top of the range Elite. The Elite is really the device aimed for studios and studio photographers, and also gives you the opportunity.
That's what I use.
Exactly, there you are. There's Damian's commendation there. But basically, that's the device that's used also for calibrating things like projectors as well. So, quick sort of things you should know. There's a couple of offers on the Datacolor website. There's the URL at the bottom of that slide there. The Spider Pro at the moment, it's got about, I don't know, 30 or 40 euros off. Now, pricing is in euros. Even though we're leaving Europe in the UK, we can still buy, currently anyway, from the European web store for Datacolor. So that is the European web store pricing there. Not such a good discount at the moment in pounds, just purely because of the pound changing a bit. But it is actually a very good price for, Pro is probably the most popular with hobbyist or semi-pro photographers. Elite, as you've heard from Damian, he's got the top of the range one there, and that's the device to use really if you want to get everything spot on color-wise. We're not going to get the chance to talk about the capture side of things tonight. We've talked very briefly about screen calibration there. We mentioned print calibration, which you also need to do in order to soft-proof. Come back to one of our other webinars and we can run through that with you. We're going to be doing one, I think, sort of latter part of August. We'll have a bit of a break for the summer now. But you can also see some of our pre-done ones on the website. In particular, we're going to be looking at capture in the later part of August, things that can get things correct at capture, i.e. when you've got problems like this, where you've got the same models, in this case obviously a wedding, and they're being shot in different lighting conditions, varying lighting conditions, and sometimes you want the lighting condition obviously to be captured by the camera. But if it's just purely a case of because you're outside, things are looking washed out compared to inside, perhaps where you're getting a yellowy or a reddy tint due to the lighting, compared to perhaps another internal shot, classically in weddings where you've got the reception, the church, and the outside shots all making the same subjects look different. That doesn't look too professional. So therefore, we want to be able to get you to this situation where everything looks balanced, correct, and is accurate as well. And if you're doing model photography, that side of things, you need to capture those colors correctly. That's where something like the Spider Checker in particular comes in very handy. Now, Damian mentioned that as well. What this is it's a fold-out. That's it folded out there. It's about the size of a tablet computer. A fold-out guide. It can be tripod-mounted. It doesn't have to be held. But it's a guide that comes with, obviously, 2 sets of color swatches. The one on the left-hand side there for skin tones, the one on the right for general colors. But it also comes with Mac or PC software as a plug-in for things like Lightroom, Photoshop, and so on, that allows you to calibrate your entire color wheel. So as opposed to just saying, I want to get my skin tones correct, I'll use Photoshop to get that skin tone looking as much as possible like I vaguely remember it looking. Shooting this allows you to, or allows the software rather, to adjust your whole color wheel of your software, and therefore your output as well later on, to get that capture correct, to get every color captured correctly. So come back, as I say, we'll be talking more about that in the later sessions we do, the events we do, and also the webinars we'll be doing in in August. As mentioned, we've got various different tools there, things like the Spider Cube and the lens cows are great for making sure your lenses or your cameras and lens are autofocusing correctly. If some of you are thinking, oh, there's got to be some other special bundles out there at the moment that are going to give me everything I need for capture, for screen calibration, and for print, then you can get a bundle with the Spider Cube, which is essentially a high definition grey card. You've also got the Spider Elite, top of the range Spider for screen calibration that Damian uses there, and the Spider Print for print calibration. Those come in a combined bundle, which does come somewhere around I don't know, probably a good £100 or €100 discount, because the Spider Print on its own is actually about £299 list price. But the whole of this bundle is currently €359 if you go to that same URL, the spider.datacolor.com/orders URL, and you can get a good discount on the whole bundle there. It comes in a nice portable case as well. That's going to be it from me on as far as anything on color management is concerned tonight. Just so you're aware, if you want to see more, we do also have our own YouTube channel in the form of the Next Tech YouTube channel. Go there, you can see some snippets of videos from my good self, that's me, that will cover off more in more detail. You'll see me using the data color products and see how you can calibrate the various different parts of your workflow. We've also got a free downloadable ebook. I think it's actually being updated at the moment, so this URL may not work at the moment, but go and have a check of that URL, or have check back later on. More importantly, you can ask your questions any second now when we open that up for you on the questions and answers panel. If we don't answer everything tonight because we are over time, go to the website there, and you can pop in. Oh, actually, sorry, this is showing you where you can go to see our next webinars. Beg your pardon. So that's the URL for our next set of webinars: spider.datacolor.com/webinars. No www in there, don't forget. Likewise, if you wanted to get any further answers to questions that we don't get a chance to answer tonight, there's a free phone number there. It is 2 zeros because it's a pan-European free phone number for questions about anything on the colour side of things, or you can pop in your questions onto our free ticketing line there. Just go to that ticketing line listed there under the http://support.datacolor.com URL. That is it from me, folks. A bit quicker, as I say, from my point of view tonight, but thank you very much for your time. We'll now open up the questions. I'm sure Boris will